He stood outside the exam room, eyes full of fear and desperation. The clock was ticking, and his future hung in the balance. No ID, no entry. The teacher snapped, her voice cutting through his hopes like a blade. Time slipped away with each passing second. Other students filed past him into the hall, their confident strides a sharp contrast to his frozen panic. He had studied for years for this moment, sacrificed everything, and now it seemed it would all be for nothing. Then came the sound that changed everything. Helicopter blades slicing through the air, growing louder and closer. A chopper descended fast, landing right outside the examination center in a cloud of dust and disbelief. A man jumped out, clutching something in his trembling hands, and ran straight toward the building. He must take this exam, he shouted over the noise, because the world was about to discover why this boy's education mattered more than anyone could imagine. Welcome to Heroes Unheard. Before we continue this incredible story, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, please hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being part of our community. The National Medical College Entrance Examination was the most competitive test in the country, with over 2 million students competing for just 50,000 seats in medical schools across the nation. The examination was held simultaneously at hundreds of centers nationwide, with security protocols so strict they rivaled those of state secrets. For most candidates, the exam represented the culmination of years of intensive preparation, expensive coaching classes, and family investments that often reached hundreds of thousands of dollars. Students from privileged backgrounds had access to the best tutors, study materials, private laboratories for practical training, and even specialized meditation coaches to help them manage exam stress. The coaching industry itself had become a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, with some institutes charging fees that exceeded the annual income of middle-class families. Students would relocate to coaching hubs like Kota and Delhi, spending 2 to 3 years in intense preparation that resembled military training more than traditional education. But for Raj Patel, a 17-year-old from a remote village in Gujarat, this exam represented something far more profound. It was his only chance to escape a cycle of poverty that had trapped his family for generations. His father was a day laborer who earned barely enough to feed the family, working in brick kilns during summer and as a farmhand during monsoon season. His mother, Kamala, worked as a domestic helper in nearby towns, traveling by bus for hours each day to clean houses and wash clothes for middle-class families. Her earnings supplemented their meager income, but even combined, their resources barely covered basic necessities like food and shelter. Raj had never attended a coaching class or owned a single new textbook until he was 15 years old. His education had been pieced together from borrowed books, photocopied study materials, online resources accessed through a shared computer at the village community center, and the guidance of his schoolteacher, Mr. Sharma, who had recognized his exceptional intelligence and stayed after hours to tutor him for free. The boy's academic brilliance had emerged early, despite the overwhelming obstacles. By age 12, he was solving mathematical problems that challenged students 5 years older. His understanding of scientific concepts was so advanced that visiting education officials had initially suspected him of memorizing answers without comprehension, until extended questioning revealed the depth of his genuine understanding. When district education officers conducted surprise visits to assess teaching quality, they would often test Raj informally and find themselves amazed by his grasp of complex concepts. One inspector, Dr. Priya Mehta, had described him in her report as a once-in-a-generation mind trapped by circumstances beyond his control. Mr. Sharma had fought tirelessly to ensure Raj received the education he deserved. The teacher had used his own modest salary to purchase textbooks, had driven his old motorcycle to Raj's village every weekend for 3 years to provide additional tutoring, and had even paid for Raj's internet access so he could study online when the village power grid was unreliable. The dedication had come at personal cost to Mr. Sharma, whose own family had questioned his decision to invest so much time and money in a student who might never be able to repay the investment. But the teacher had seen something in Raj that reminded him of why he had chosen education as his calling. This boy has the potential to become a doctor who could serve thousands of people, Mr. Sharma would tell his skeptical relatives. How can I measure that against the cost of a few books and some petrol for my motorcycle? The examination center was located in Ahmedabad, nearly 200 kilometers from Raj's village. The journey required multiple bus transfers and cost more than his family earned in a week, but they had saved every rupee possible to ensure he could attend. His entire village had contributed small amounts, a few coins from the tea shop owner, vegetables from farmers to reduce grocery expenses, even a loan from the village moneylender at reduced interest. The community's investment in Raj's education reflected not just faith in his abilities, but hope that his success could pave the way for other children from their village to pursue higher education. If Raj could become a doctor, it would prove that talent could overcome circumstances, inspiring other families to prioritize their children's education despite economic hardships. Raj had traveled to the city the previous day, staying in a budget hostel that cost 20 rupees per night and housed dozens of examination candidates in cramped dormitory-style rooms. He had spent the evening reviewing his notes by candlelight, as the hostel's electricity was inconsistent, and had woken before dawn to reach the examination center early. The examination center was a prestigious private school whose imposing architecture and manicured grounds immediately highlighted the social divide between Raj and most other candidates. Students arrived in private cars with their parents, carrying expensive bags filled with multiple pen sets, scientific calculators, and good luck charms that cost more than Raj's family spent on food in several months. The contrast was stark and uncomfortable. Other candidates wore designer clothes and spoke English with the confidence that came from years of private schooling. Many discussed their backup plans, medical colleges in other countries, alternative careers in engineering or business, options that required resources Raj's family couldn't even imagine. Raj clutched his documents in a plastic folder that Mr. Sharma had given him, along with strict instructions about the importance of keeping his identification safe. The teacher had stressed repeatedly that without proper ID, no candidate would be allowed to take the exam, regardless of their preparation or circumstances. Your ID card is your passport to the future, Mr. Sharma had said during their final meeting. Guard it with your life, because losing it means losing everything we've worked for. As Raj approached the registration desk, he felt increasingly self-conscious about his appearance. His clothes were clean but obviously inexpensive, purchased from a local market rather than branded stores. His canvas shoes showed signs of the long journey from his village, and his canvas bag was a stark contrast to the leather backpacks carried by other candidates. Other students glanced at him with curiosity or mild disdain, clearly recognizing him as someone from a very different social stratum. Some whispered among themselves, speculating about how someone with his background had managed to qualify for such a competitive examination. Mrs. Varma, the supervising teacher at the registration desk, looked up as Raj presented his admit card. She was a stern woman in her 50s who had been supervising entrance examinations for over a decade and took pride in maintaining strict security protocols that ensured the integrity of the testing process. Her experience had taught her to be suspicious of any irregularities, and she had developed a reputation for rigid enforcement of rules that some colleagues considered excessive. But Mrs. Varma believed that fairness required treating all candidates exactly the same, regardless of their background or circumstances. ID card, Mrs. Varma said curtly, extending her hand without looking directly at Raj. Raj reached into his folder with confidence, expecting to find his ID card in the plastic pocket where he had carefully placed it the previous evening. But as his fingers searched the empty pocket, his heart began to race with rising panic. He searched frantically through all his documents, checking every pocket of his folder multiple times, unfolding papers and shaking the folder in hopes that the card might have slipped into an unexpected location. But the ID card was nowhere to be found. "Sir, my ID card," Raj stammered, his voice barely audible as the reality of his situation began to sink in. The confident preparation he had felt moments earlier evaporated, replaced by crushing fear. Mrs. Varma looked at him impatiently, her expression showing no sympathy for his distress. "No ID, no entry. Those are the rules, and they apply to everyone without exception. Next candidate, please." Raj's mind raced as he tried to remember when he had last seen his ID card. He recalled checking all his documents before leaving the hostel that morning, carefully verifying that everything was in order. But the journey to the examination center had involved crowded buses and multiple transfers where pickpockets operated freely. The card could have fallen out during any part of his travel, dropped on a bus floor, or slipped from his folder while navigating through crowded stations. The possibility that someone might have deliberately stolen it also occurred to him, as ID cards could be valuable to criminals engaged in identity fraud. "Ma'am, please," Raj pleaded, his voice breaking with desperation. "I have my admit card, my school leaving certificate, even my birth certificate. I've traveled so far for this exam. 3 years of preparation." Mrs. Varma shook her head firmly, unmoved by his emotional appeal. "The rules are clear and non-negotiable. Government-issued photo ID is mandatory for security reasons. No exceptions can be made, regardless of circumstances." Behind Raj, a line of other students was forming, and he could hear their impatient murmurs as they waited to register. Some made comments about village boys who couldn't even keep track of their documents, adding humiliation to his mounting panic. "Typical," one student muttered loud enough for others to hear. "These people from rural areas don't understand how important these things are." Probably his first time dealing with official documents. Another candidate joined the mockery. "I don't understand why they even let people like this apply. If he can't handle basic paperwork, how is he going to manage medical school?" "Step aside, please," Mrs. Varma said firmly, gesturing for the next student in line. "You're holding up the registration process for other candidates." Raj moved away from the desk, his hands shaking as he searched through his documents one more time, hoping against hope that the ID card would somehow materialize. The examination was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes, and he could see other students entering the hall with confidence while his future crumbled around him. He pulled out his old mobile phone, a basic model that Mr. Sharma had given him for emergencies, and tried calling his teacher. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail, probably because Mr. Sharma was teaching his morning classes and couldn't answer. Raj tried calling his parents, but their phone was often turned off to save battery, and today was no exception. Even if he could reach them, there was nothing they could do from their village to help him recover a lost ID card in a distant city. As minutes ticked by relentlessly, Raj felt waves of despair washing over him like a tsunami. 3 years of intensive study, countless sacrifices by his family and teacher, sleepless nights spent studying by lamplight, the hopes of his entire village. All of it seemed to be ending because of a lost piece of plastic. He thought about Mr. Sharma, who had invested so much time and energy in his education, often staying late into the evening to help him understand complex concepts. The teacher had believed in him when no one else did, had seen potential where others saw only poverty and rural simplicity. He thought about his parents, who had worked extra hours for months to pay for his exam fees and travel expenses. His mother had taken on additional cleaning jobs, working until her hands were raw and bleeding. Also, he could have this opportunity to change their family's fortune. He thought about the children in his village who looked up to him as proof that education could overcome poverty. If he failed to take this exam, it would send a message that dreams were futile for people like them, that circumstances of birth determined destiny more than talent or effort. Other students continued to stream past him into the examination hall, and Raj could hear the supervising staff beginning their final preparations. The clock on the wall showed 20 minutes until the exam would begin, and he knew that once the doors closed, his opportunity would be gone forever. He considered various desperate options, trying to convince another supervisor, offering to provide additional documentation, even attempting to enter the hall without permission. But he knew that any violation of exam protocols would not only prevent him from taking the test today, but could potentially bar him from future attempts. With 15 minutes remaining, Raj sat on a bench outside the examination center, tears streaming down his face as he accepted that his dreams were ending. The weight of disappointment was crushing, not just for his own lost future, but for all the people who had invested their hopes in his success. But unknown to Raj, a dramatic rescue was already in motion 200 kilometers away in his village. Mr. Sharma had finished teaching his morning classes and returned to his small house for lunch when he discovered Raj's ID card on the floor beside his motorcycle. The card had apparently fallen from Raj's folder during their final review session the previous evening, when the teacher had given him last-minute advice and encouragement for the examination. In the darkness and excitement of their farewell, Neither had noticed the critical document lying on the ground. Mr. Sharma immediately understood the catastrophic implications of this discovery. He tried calling Raj's phone repeatedly, but the calls couldn't connect due to network issues at the examination center. The teacher realized that conventional methods of communication wouldn't work in time to prevent disaster. Faced with his student's future hanging in the balance, Mr. Sharma made a desperate decision that would require calling in favors from his entire network of former students and colleagues. He contacted Dr. Aditi Singh, a brilliant physician who had studied under him 15 years earlier and had gone on to become a successful doctor and social activist. Dr. Singh had never forgotten the teacher who had recognized her potential and supported her education despite her own humble background. When she had struggled with chemistry concepts, Mr. Sharma had arranged special tutoring. When her family faced financial difficulties, he had quietly paid her examination fees. When she had doubted her ability to succeed in medical school, he had encouraged her to persist. When Mr. Sharma explained the current emergency, Dr. Singh immediately understood both the urgency and the broader implications. She knew that students like Raj rarely got second chances, and that this lost ID card could derail not just his medical career, but his family's hopes for breaking out of generational poverty. Dr. Singh had built a successful practice in the city and had maintained connections with wealthy patients and social contacts who possessed resources that teachers in rural schools could never access. Within minutes of receiving Mr. Sharma's call, she had contacted a friend who owned a helicopter charter service. The pilot, Captain Ravi Kumar, was initially skeptical about the emergency nature of the request. Helicopter flights were expensive and typically reserved for medical emergencies or VIP transportation. But when Dr. Singh explained the situation, a brilliant student whose future hung in the balance because of a lost ID card, something in the story resonated with him. Captain Kumar had grown up in a middle-class family and had achieved his pilot's license through scholarship programs and hard work rather than family wealth. He understood how small obstacles could derail the dreams of talented individuals who lacked resources and connections. "How much time do we have?" Captain Kumar asked. "The exam starts in 45 minutes, Dr. Singh replied. "It's a 2-hour flight under normal circumstances, but if we push the aircraft to maximum speed, we can make it," Captain Kumar said decisively. "Tell the teacher to meet me at the airfield in 10 minutes. As the helicopter took off from a field near Raj's village with Mr. Sharma aboard, clutching the ID card that could save his student's future, Raj was sitting outside the examination center with only 10 minutes remaining before the test would begin. The sound of helicopter blades was initially just background noise in the busy city, but as it grew louder and closer, students and staff at the examination center began to look up with curiosity. Helicopters were not uncommon in major cities, but they rarely landed in residential areas where educational institutions were located. Mrs. Varma, who was making final announcements before sealing the examination hall, paused as the helicopter noise grew so loud that her voice was being drowned out. Through the windows, everyone could see a helicopter approaching rapidly and apparently preparing to land in the school's playground. The aircraft touched down in the small playground adjacent to the examination center, sending up clouds of dust and causing considerable commotion among students and staff who had never witnessed such a dramatic arrival. Before the rotors had even stopped spinning, Mr. Sharma jumped out, clutching a plastic folder and running toward the building with desperate urgency. Raj Patel," he shouted over the noise of the helicopter, scanning the crowd of students who had gathered to witness this extraordinary scene. His voice carried across the courtyard, filled with the same determination that had driven him to invest 3 years in his student's education. Raj looked up in disbelief, unable to process what he was seeing. His teacher, the man who had sacrificed so much for his education, had just arrived by helicopter with minutes to spare before the most important exam of his life. The impossibility of the situation made it seem like a dream or hallucination. Mr. Sharma spotted Raj and ran directly to him, breathless from the flight and the adrenaline of the high-stakes rescue mission. "Your ID card," he gasped, pulling the document from his folder with shaking hands. "It fell on my motorcycle last night. I brought it as fast as I could." The reunion was brief but emotional. Raj clutched the ID card as if it were made of gold, tears of relief replacing his earlier tears of despair. Around them, Hundreds of students and examination staff watched in amazement, many filming the scene with their phones as they realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Mrs. Varma, who had witnessed the entire helicopter arrival, approached them with obvious bewilderment. "What exactly is happening here?" she asked, her stern demeanor softened by the dramatic nature of the situation. Mr. Sharma, still catching his breath from the flight and the sprint from the helicopter, explained the situation quickly. "This is my student, Raj Patel. He lost his ID card last night at my house, and we brought it to him by helicopter. He must take this exam." Looking at the ID card that Mr. Sharma handed her, Mrs. Varma verified its authenticity and compared the photo to Raj's face. Everything was in order, and there were still 5 minutes remaining before the examination would officially begin. "Registration table," she said simply, gesturing toward her desk with newfound respect for the lengths this teacher and student had gone to ensure the opportunity wasn't lost. The final registration process took only 2 minutes, and Raj was escorted into the examination hall with moments to spare. As he took his seat among hundreds of other candidates, he could still hear the helicopter outside preparing for its return journey to Gujarat. The 3-hour examination passed in a blur of concentration and determination. Raj found that his intimate knowledge of the subjects, developed through years of intensive study with limited resources, served him well. The questions that seemed to challenge other students felt familiar to him, as Mr. Sharma had always emphasized understanding fundamental concepts rather than memorizing superficial facts. His rural background had taught him to think creatively and solve problems with limited resources, skills that proved valuable when facing complex questions that required innovative approaches. While other students had been trained to follow standard formulas, Raj's education had emphasized critical thinking and adaptability. When the examination concluded, Raj emerged to find Mr. Sharma waiting for him, having watched through the window as his student worked. The teacher's presence provided a sense of continuity and support that helped Raj process the extraordinary events of the day. "How did you manage the helicopter?" Raj asked, still amazed by the dramatic rescue that had saved his future. Mr. Sharma smiled and explained about Dr. Singh's intervention and the network of support that had mobilized to ensure Raj's opportunity wasn't lost. "She remembered what it was like to need help achieving her dreams," he said. "Now she helps others the way we helped her." The story of Raj's helicopter rescue spread rapidly through social media and news outlets, capturing public attention not just because of its dramatic nature, but because it highlighted the systemic barriers faced by talented students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Television news programs featured the story as an example of how determination and community support could overcome obstacles, while education policy experts used it to argue for reforms that would reduce bureaucratic barriers for rural students. 6 months later, when the examination results were announced, Raj had scored in the top percentile, earning admission to one of the country's most prestigious medical colleges with a full scholarship that covered not just tuition but also living expenses and study materials. His success validated not just his own abilities, but the investment that Mr. Sharma, Dr. Singh, and his entire community had made in his education. The helicopter rescue became a symbol of how extraordinary measures were sometimes necessary to ensure that talent could overcome circumstances. Dr. Singh, whose quick thinking and resources had made the helicopter rescue possible, established a scholarship fund to support other students like Raj who faced financial and logistical barriers to accessing quality education. The fund was named the Emergency Education Foundation and included provisions for transportation assistance during critical examinations. The helicopter pilot, Captain Kumar, refused to accept payment for the rescue flight, saying that being part of a young person's educational success was reward enough. He began volunteering his services for other educational emergencies, helping students reach important examinations and interviews when conventional transportation failed. Raj's village celebrated his success as a community achievement, recognizing that his medical degree would eventually benefit not just his family, but the entire region, which had been underserved by healthcare professionals for generations. The village school was renamed in honor of Mr. Sharma, acknowledging the teacher's extraordinary dedication to his students. Mr. Sharma continued teaching in the village school, but his story inspired education officials to develop new policies supporting rural students. Mobile examination centers were established to reduce travel barriers. Emergency protocols were created to handle documentation crises, and scholarship programs were expanded to ensure that financial constraints didn't prevent talented students from pursuing higher education. Years later, Dr. Raj Patel returned to his village as a qualified physician, establishing a medical clinic that served the healthcare needs of the entire region. He never forgot that his career had been saved by a helicopter flight made possible by the dedication of his teacher and the generosity of a former student who had faced similar challenges. The ID card that had nearly derailed his future was framed in his clinic's waiting room, serving as a reminder that success often depends not just on individual effort, but on communities of support that recognize and nurture potential wherever it exists. The story became part of medical school curricula as an example of how systemic barriers could be overcome through community effort and individual determination, inspiring future generations of doctors to remember their obligations to serve underserved communities. This story was brought to you by Heroes Unheard. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition but deserved more than anyone else? Tell us in the comments what they meant to you and how you remember them. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We'll see you in the next one.